Jake buys a house. Marcus rents the exact same house down the street and invests the difference. They both think they made the smarter choice. And they're both wrong. Because one of them forgot that a house eats money in ways nobody warns you about. And the other forgot that discipline is a lot harder than it sounds. And when you actually run the numbers over 30 years, the answer flips more than once. By the end, one of them is sitting on a fortune the other one can't touch. And it's probably not who you think. Let's keep this fair. Jake and Marcus both have $60,000 saved. They both earn $70,000 a year. Same age, same city, same neighborhood, same financial starting point. The only difference is what they sign. Jake buys a $300,000 home. He puts his entire $60,000 down, a full 20%, so there's no PMI, and he takes out a 30-year mortgage on the remaining $240,000 at 7% interest. His principal and interest payment is about $1,597 a month. Add property taxes of around $275 a month and homeowners insurance of about $150, and his baseline is roughly $2,000 a month before he's fixed a single thing. And then there's closing costs. Jake also handed over about $9,000 at signing for lender fees, title insurance, and appraisal. That money didn't buy him equity. It just vanished into the transaction. But Jake gets the keys, stands in the driveway, and thinks, I own this. It feels incredible. Marcus rents the identical house next door for $1,800 a month. No down payment, no closing costs, no property taxes, no repairs. He keeps his $60,000 and drops it into a total stock market index fund. Then he does something 95% of renters never actually do. He sets up an automatic investment of the difference between Jake's housing cost and his rent, about $470 a month, straight into the market on autopilot. Marcus's friends ask if he's worried about throwing money away on rent. He says, I'm renting the house and buying the market. They nod politely and change the subject. Nobody's impressed. On day one, Jake has a home, a mortgage, and a story to tell at dinner parties. Marcus has a lease and a brokerage confirmation email. It's not even close in terms of how it feels. But feelings and math are two very different things. For the first few years, Jake is living the homeowner dream. He paints the walls whatever color he wants, he builds equity with every payment, he's deducting mortgage interest on his taxes, and he drives up to his house every night feeling like an adult who made it. Marcus logs into his brokerage account once a quarter, watches the number go up a little, down a little, then up a little more. Year one, his $60,000 grows to about $66,000. It doesn't feel like anything is happening. There's no house key in his pocket, no address that's his, just a number on a screen. Now let's run the actual numbers, because this is where the napkin math falls apart for both of them. Watch what happens to Jake between years 1 and 5. People think a mortgage payment is your housing cost. It isn't. It's the floor. In his first 5 years, Jake replaces a water heater for $1,300, fixes a roof leak for $2,900, and pays for an air conditioning repair in the middle of August for $4,500, because it's 98 degrees and he can't exactly wait. The general rule is to budget 1% of the home's value per year for maintenance. On a $300,000 home, that's about $3,000 every single year, and it never shows up when it's convenient. Then property taxes creep up, insurance premiums climb, and the HOA sends a letter about a special assessment for the neighborhood. None of this was in the $1,597 payment Jake bragged about, but it all comes out of his pocket. Here's what quietly eats a homeowner alive. Maintenance and repairs, roughly 1% of the home's value a year, where some years it's a $200 faucet and other years it's a $12,000 roof you didn't see coming. Property taxes and insurance, which only go up, because you're really renting your house from the government forever. And if you doubt that, stop paying property taxes and see who actually owns it. The transaction tax, where buying costs about 3% in closing fees and selling costs about 6% in agent commissions, which means roughly 9% of the home's value evaporates just from getting in and getting out. And opportunity cost, because every dollar locked inside those walls is a dollar that isn't compounding in the market. None of this shows up in the monthly payment, but it shows up eventually. Meanwhile, Marcus is doing absolutely nothing. No repairs, no property taxes, no 2 a.m. call about a burst pipe. His $60,000 plus $470 a month at roughly a 10% average annual return has grown to about $110,000 by year 5, and he spent 0 weekends at the hardware store. So at year 5, who's winning? Let's check the scoreboard. Jake's home has appreciated at about 4% a year and is now worth roughly $365,000. His mortgage balance is down to about $226,000. That puts his equity at roughly $139,000. Sounds like a blowout win for Jake, until you remember that if he sold today, 6% in selling costs would erase about $22,000 of that, and a big chunk of his equity is really just his original down payment plus closing costs he'll never get back. Marcus has about $110,000, entirely liquid, entirely his, with 0 debt attached to it. At year 5, they're closer than anyone would guess. And here's the first plot twist most people never see coming. Jake's housing payment is frozen. Marcus's rent is not. Jake locked in a fixed mortgage, so his principal and interest will be the same $1,597 in year 20 as it is today. But Marcus's rent rises about 3 to 4% every year. That $1,800 rent becomes $2,100 by year 5, $2,550 by year 10, and over $3,400 by year 20. Do you see what that does? In the early years, Marcus had extra money to invest because renting was cheaper. But as rent climbs and Jake's payment stays flat, that advantage shrinks, and then it reverses. By around year 12, Marcus's rent is higher than Jake's entire mortgage payment. So now Marcus has less to invest every month, not more, while Jake's cost barely moves. This is the part both crowds get wrong. The math doesn't sit still. It flips depending on how long you stay. By year 10, Jake's home is worth around $444,000. His mortgage is down to about $206,000, and his equity is roughly $238,000. While his payment still starts with a 1, and his renting neighbors are now paying $2,550. Marcus's portfolio, with those rising rents slowly squeezing his contributions, is sitting around $250,000. Still enormous, still liquid, but Jake has quietly pulled even, and the gap is starting to widen in the homeowner's favor. Compounding is boring for the first 5 years and astonishing for the next 15. But so is a fixed mortgage payment being eaten alive by 20 years of inflation. By year 20, Jake's house is worth roughly $657,000. His mortgage balance is down to about $137,000, and his equity is somewhere around $520,000, while his payment is still $1,597 in a world where rent for that same house is now $3,400 a month. Jake is effectively living for less than half of what his renting neighbors pay. Marcus's portfolio, squeezed by 2 decades of rising rent, has still grown to somewhere around $600,000 to $700,000, as long as he never stopped investing and never panic sold. And that's a massive if we'll come back to. And by year 30, Jake makes his final mortgage payment. The house is his, free and clear, worth close to $970,000. And his only housing costs for the rest of his life are taxes, insurance, and upkeep. Marcus is still writing a rent check, now well over $4,000 a month, for the rest of his life, with no end date, forever. Over a long enough timeline, the forced discipline of a mortgage and a fixed payment in an inflating world is brutally hard to beat. But if I only showed you the case for buying, I'd be doing exactly what every real estate influencer does. Renting has real, quantifiable advantages that homeowners love to gloss over. Flexibility has a dollar value. If Jake gets a job offer across the country in year 3, he's stuck. Selling costs him about 9% in transaction fees, and if the market dipped, he could lose money getting out. Marcus gives 30 days notice and leaves. In a world where the average person changes jobs every few years, that flexibility isn't sentimental, it's financial. Renting is the maximum you'll pay. Owning is the minimum. Marcus's rent is capped at the number on the lease. Jake's costs have no ceiling. The roof, the furnace, the foundation, the special assessment all live on his side of the ledger. And Marcus is genuinely richer on paper if he stays disciplined and moves often. If Marcus rents in a city with cheap rent relative to home prices, and he actually invests every dollar of the difference, he can absolutely out-earn a homeowner, especially in the first decade, before rent inflation catches up. That last part is the whole game, and here's the uncomfortable truth. Almost nobody actually invests the difference. The renter who was going to invest what he saved usually just spends it. A mortgage, for all its costs, is a forced savings account with a lock on it. That psychological reality is why homeowners, on average, end up with far more net worth than renters. Not because renting is mathematically worse, but because buying forces a discipline most people can't muster on their own. So renting wins in specific, identifiable situations. If you're going to move within 5 years, rent. The transaction costs will destroy you otherwise. If you live in a market where a home costs 25 or 30 times its annual rent, renting and investing is mathematically the stronger play. And if you have the rare discipline to automatically invest every dollar you save by renting, month after month, through every crash, you can build serious wealth without ever owning a square foot. Buying a home isn't a bad investment. It's a misunderstood one. It's not a wealth rocket, and it's not throwing money away. It's a forced savings plan with a roof on top and a fixed payment that inflation slowly erases. Jake and Marcus both walked away from that decision thinking they made the smart play. Jake thought owning was the guaranteed path to wealth. Marcus thought renting and investing would obviously win. Neither of them actually sat down and mapped out what it costs. In dollars, in flexibility, in discipline, and in time. Over 5, 10, and 30 years. The real trap isn't renting, and it isn't buying. The real trap is making a 6-figure decision based on a slogan. Rent is throwing money away, or a house is the best investment you'll ever make, without ever running the full numbers for your own city, your own timeline, and your own discipline. And if you're wondering what happens when you buy a home and rent out part of it, or buy with less than 20% down and invest the rest, that's a completely different conversation, and the math might change everything you think you know. But for now, the next time someone tells you renting is always a waste, or buying always wins, ask them one question. How long are you staying, and will you actually invest the difference? Because the answer that includes both of those is the only answer that matters.